My name is Danica, and last time we talked I said I would be making regular videos, and I definitely did not do that. What happened in between is that I got my first contract as a teacher, and it turns out that that takes up a lot of time. I'm enjoying it, but it's also really challenging. I also started co-hosting on the All the Books podcast for Book Riot, and I have recently become a bibliologist, so I recommend books for people who sign up for tailored book recommendations. And also, the last video I posted here, I said that I had stopped making videos for Book Riot, so I would start making them again for this channel. But now I'm actually making videos for Book Riot again, and that's because I'm taking over for Rincey for the new releases videos, so I'm going to be back over at that channel, and I'm not going to guarantee that I'll be making regular videos here as well, because I'm not going to make promises I can't keep, but I'm going to try filming them back to back so that hopefully I can make at least the occasional video here as well. So for my first video back, I wanted to do a yearly wrap-up of my year in reading. I read a lot less than usual this year. I think I read about half of what I usually would, and that's because my pandemic brain just really didn't want to concentrate on books, and I lost my routine and my commute where I did most of my reading, and anyway, didn't read a lot of books. So in years past, I've done like my top 18 of 2018 or whatever. This year, I just have 10. There are lots of books that I enjoyed that I didn't put on the list. I'll run down some of my honorable mentions really quick. There's The Heiress by Molly Greeley, which is a lesbian historical romance slash Pride and Prejudice retelling type thing. Happily Ever Afters by Elise Bryant, which is a black YA romance that plays with romance tropes. It's really cute. Be Gay, Do Comics, edited by Matt Bors. The title really says it all. The Henna Wars, an FF YA story about rival henna artists. The Worldbreaker Saga, which is a complex, grimdark fantasy that blew my mind. It has parallel worlds. The Seep, which is a queer trans novella that has an alien invasion where they solve all the problems in the world, but the main character is still miserable. Kenzie Kickstarts a Team, which is a beginning chapter book with a roller derby team and a queer main character, and she has a trans dad. Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins, which is an enemies to lovers FF royal romance YA book. And Full Disclosure by Cameron Garrett, about a musical theater fan who is HIV positive and exploring and coming to terms with her bisexuality, and also a cute MF romance. So the books that I picked for the actual list are a mix of the books that I enjoyed the most at the time and also the books that I think are going to stick with me for the longest. But again, it's pretty arbitrary, so any of the books that I mentioned are great and you should check them out. In my number 10 spot is A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. This is the sequel and the concluding book in the duology that started with an absolutely remarkable thing that got a big boost this year when we had those mysterious monoliths. Which, is that not even a story anymore? It's the weirdest year ever. I was pleasantly surprised by this duology. I love that the main character is complicated and really flawed, and we start to see her grow a bit more in this volume. We also get to see a bunch of other characters' perspectives, which is great because I think that part of the strength of the book is all of the supporting cast. I don't think it's mentioned enough that this has a bisexual main character and that her relationship with her ex-girlfriend is a really big part of this, and that plays a big role in this volume. It also has a lot to say about fame and the internet and social media, and Hank Green is someone that I trust to have well thought out opinions, and it's just a series that leaves me thinking. It's something I want to come back to because there's a lot of ideas in there, but it's also a fun sci-fi plot. And then we have a book I read for all the books that is in the number 9 spot, We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. This is a YA historical fiction about the Japanese internment camps. This is something I didn't know very much about, and there were just so many details in here that really hit me hard, talking about leading up to the camps and then being taken away. It's very emotional, and it's also a really interesting setup because there are so many point of view characters. I think there's over a dozen, and they they are all friends and siblings in this group in Japantown, so ranging from about 12 to early 20s, and they all have a different perspective on this, about the forced internment and about the war and their identity as Japanese Americans when they are being robbed of their freedom, when they are being incarcerated. All of these kids and teenagers who are figuring out, how do I live through this? How do I reconcile with this? And you see all of these different approaches, characters who are really angry and characters who shut down and characters who are trying to help others, and it brings a really multifaceted look at this. So this is one that I thought was really educational and thought-provoking. For spot number 8, I have Love After the End, an anthology of Two-Spirit and indigiqueer speculative fiction edited by Joshua Whitehead. I loved this collection. There's a gay romance with a cybernetic rat in this, so what else do I need to say? But really it is a fascinating exploration of science fiction and fantasy, and it made me think about how colonial SFF often is, whether it's fantasy worlds that are really just medieval England, or whether it's science fiction stories that are literally about setting up colonies, about conquering new worlds. A lot of these stories talk about the relationship to land and how that stretches back through generations, and the responsibility of taking care of that land, and what does that look like when you are in a crisis situation where something like global warming has spun so wildly out of control that Earth is no longer really inhabitable, and who decides to stay and who decides to leave. So that was a really interesting take on stories that I haven't seen framed in that way. And of course they are all Two-Spirit or indigiqueer. Then I have Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth, which is a book that I have been waiting for so long. Ever since I read The Miseducation of Cameron Post and just adored it. It's one of my favorite books ever. So that was about 8 years ago, and I have just been waiting and waiting for her to put out a new book. And this one did not disappoint. It is so complex. There's so much going on. So part of the book is about a boarding school where the girls there become obsessed with Mary MacLane, who's a real life historical figure who wrote her memoirs and published them in the early 1900s, and they are now titled what she wanted them to be titled, which is I Await the Devil's Coming. And they are bisexual and feminist and really challenging, even kind of by today's standards, but definitely by those standards. So these girls are fans of Mary MacLane, they become a little bit obsessive about it, and then there are these deaths that are associated with this particular book of Mary MacLane's. So there's the story about these girls' deaths, there's the story about the school's headmistress and how she founded the school. Those girls are sapphic, the headmistress is sapphic, and then we get another story which is about 100 years later, more than 100 years later, where they are going to film a movie based on this story. And we're seeing it from a few different perspectives. There is the woman who wrote the book that is exploring this story and that the movie's going to be based on. And then there are the two women who are playing the main characters in this movie, and one of them is a lesbian. She is very well known on social media and is out, obviously. And then there is this other woman who is a very little known actor. And then it feels like maybe during the filming they are being haunted by this story that the movie's based on, but then maybe that's just the director who's trying to make it more immersive as a story. So those are kind of the two main pieces, but then we also got all of these other stories that are spiraling around it. So it is, like I said, very complicated. There's a lot going on. It is a horror book, but there is a lot of humor to it as well. It's self-referential. It talks about different horror tropes. It is very, very queer. There are so many queer main characters in this. I want to say there's at least 10 major sapphic characters in this book. And it spans all of these different time periods and the stories weave together, and it will definitely make you think differently about WASP past. Very creepy, definitely some body horror stuff. It is incredibly well written. It is so intricately put together. The only reason it's not higher on this list is because it is unsettling in a way that I don't think I am likely to reread. Maybe I will someday. So I respect that it is very well done. It is a really well put together story. It is told very well, but it's also unsettling. And then into a book that is not unsettling, the Adventure Zone graphic novel, Pedals to the Metal. So I listened to the podcast, The Adventure Zone, really enjoyed it. It starts off super goofy and then it gets more story-based as it goes on, and I really became invested in these characters, and I think that the graphic novel adaptation is even better. It keeps a lot of that silly humor, but it also has a more developed and streamlined plot, and the artwork is amazing. There's so much detail in there, and they just make me happy. They're always something that I look forward to. I don't really have that much to say about it, honestly. I just really like them. My number 5 pick is a manga, and it's called How Do We Relationship by Tamiful. And I really enjoy Yuri manga, but sometimes you want to read about characters who are not schoolgirls. Sometimes you want your manga to have adult characters who are still attracted to women. And this one was one of my favorites. It might be my new favorite manga. Basically, it's about 2 lesbians who meet in university and say, you know what? I don't know that I'm gonna bump into a lot of other girls who are into girls. Why don't we just date? And it is entirely artificial and kind of awkward. They're very different people, they have very different personalities, but they decide to just try to date and see what happens. And it is a manga book that has more sexuality than I am used to from manga. Most of the Yuri that I've read is very just like blushing, and that's about it. Holding hands. Ooh. So this is one of the few manga that I've read that actually has sex scenes and that don't seem for the male gaze. I mean, who knows? It felt respectful to me. But there's a lot of humor to this, and it really just looks at relationships and the kind of work that you have to put in. I'm really looking forward to the series continuing because I really like these characters, and I think them being such different personalities is what makes their relationship work and what makes it interesting. In the number 4 spot, I have Butter, Honey, Pig Bread by Francesca Equiesi. This is a literary fiction book that is about 3 different women. There is the mom and her 2 twin daughters, starting with the mother's childhood, and there's definitely trigger warnings for suicide ideation. So the mother is an obanje, which is an Igbo term for spirits who are said to plague a mother with frequent miscarriages. She finds being alive, being bound to a body, boring, and she goes back to the spirit world multiple times. But Kimbira Nachi sees how much this is torturing her mother, who keeps losing her babies early, so she decides to stick around in this world, and her kin, so the people in the spirit world, keep calling to her and keep trying to get her to come back, and she keeps kind of fighting it to stay. And then we jump to her daughters Taye and Kayende visiting her as adults. It's been a long time since they have spoken to each other, and there is something that happened in their past that tore them apart and that they aren't talking about. So Kimbira Nachi struggles to make it in this world. She is too sensitive, she is really affected by things, and when her husband dies, when her daughter's father dies, she goes into a deep depression and can't really take care of her children. And then the 2 twin sisters really define themselves in opposition to the other. They both kind of feel inferior to each other in different ways. I liked how this book is an exploration of these flawed, complicated people and their relationships to each other. And although it deals with difficult subject matter, it also feels hopeful. This is a beautifully written book that has so many different themes running throughout. Obviously, food is a big part of it, so the book is structured into a section that's titled Butter, and then Honey and Pig Bread, and those are themes that run through all these different characters' lives and the ways that they interact with each other. It's really beautiful. I highly recommend it. There's definitely trigger warnings for rape, for childhood sexual abuse, as well as I said, miscarriage and suicide ideation. So there's definitely dark themes, but it is really beautifully told, and like I said, I think it's hopeful overall. The third book on my list is Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is an MF romance that's in my top 3 books of the year, so that tells you how good it is. It definitely helped that I listened to the audiobook, which is brilliant, and the main character's name is Danica. Danny is short for Danica, and it is very weird to listen to a romance novel read to you that is talking about you. So it'll just have the love interest talking about how great Danica is and how beautiful Danica is, and it is a very strange thing to listen to. I don't know how much of my enjoyment of this is purely self-indulgent, but it's also a really great romance. It has a fat black bisexual main character who is really confident in herself. The love interest is this gruff security guard who runs a rugby charity where he teaches boys about toxic masculinity and about how to have good mental health and how to talk about mental health issues. So that definitely helps the MF romance of it, is that has this sensitive feminist love interest. This has fake dating. It's just really cute. It's very sexy. It just made me really happy. Every year my picks range from this is a really dark but thoughtful book to this is a book that just made me really happy. So I'm gonna just keep bouncing. This was one of my books that just made me really happy this year. And another book I read this year that made me really happy is The Tea Dragon Tapestry by Katie O'Neill. This is the last book in the Tea Dragon series, and its publication has actually been pushed to, I want to say July? It was supposed to be published in 2020, but now it is being published like mid-2021. So it's not out yet, I'm sorry, but I read it months ago and I want to talk about it. Mostly, I just love this series overall. I think that it is one of the most beautiful graphic novels I've ever read. The art style really appeals to me. It is super cute, but there are so many intricate details in the borders and in the gutters. Almost all the white space is often filled with these floral illustrations. The characters are really lovely. There's so much good communication. It is the most gentle fantasy book you can ever imagine. This was the last book in the series, which makes me sad because I just want to keep reading these forever, but I will keep coming back to them. I'll keep rereading them. They are just very soothing for my soul. In retrospect, I don't think I have anything particular to say about this volume. I did. I wrote up a whole thing for all the books, and then the publication date got pushed, so I couldn't use it for all the books. I deleted all my notes. So I no longer remember the particulars of this book. I just remember that it makes me really happy and it makes me feel really calm, and that was something I definitely needed in 2020. So if you want a very gentle, soothing book, pick up The Tea Dragon Society and all the books in it. And finally, my number one pick was a January read, which makes sense. I think that any books I read before March have a little bit of an advantage because it's when my brain was working better. But either way, it would be one of my favorites because it is an incredible, incredible book. And that is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. So this is a memoir by one of my favorite authors. She wrote My Body and Other Parties, which is an incredible short story collection. I definitely recommend that as well. But this is her memoir that is about a same-sex abusive relationship, and it's told in all of these different genres. So there'll be the dream house as pulp fiction or the dream house as mystery. So one part of it is that it is just incredibly written. All of these different takes on the same story all manage to work together so well. So it is just put together in a really skillful way. But the reason this hit me so hard was because I have been in a queer relationship that was definitely unhealthy, and I think I can say abusive. And it was really difficult for me to recognize that because we don't have a lot of representation of what that looks like in a queer relationship. So there were multiple times where I thought, if this was a man, I would leave. But I couldn't recognize what abuse looked like from someone who wasn't a man. And I think that that is something that I'm not alone in experiencing. I think that as much as we definitely should talk about how men can be abusive in relationships, and it is more likely as a woman that you're going to be in a relationship with an abusive man, that doesn't mean that men are the only people who can be abusive. And it doesn't make it okay if a woman or a non-binary person is being emotionally abusive. So this book was healing in a way. It just helped me process things, and it's also something I really, really wish I could have had when I was younger. But I'm really glad that it is around now to help fill in those gaps in the archive that it documents. Obviously, this was my favorite book of the year because it was really important to me, and it's also just an incredible book for anyone to read, but it was one that I think I really needed on some level, and I only wish I could have read it sooner. So those were my top 10 books of 2020. Very arbitrary, lots of runner-ups that probably deserve the spots just as much, but that gives you an idea of some of the books that I read and loved this year. Let me know if you read any of these and what you thought of them, or let me know what your favorite books from 2020 were, just books that you've read that year. They don't have to be published that year. I hope that you're all doing well. I hope that 2021 treats you a little better than 2020 did, and thank you for watching.